Are you looking for quality APA continuing education courses on culture and diversity? Well, we got you covered. We're excited for you to explore our courses that we're offering a 50% discount for our listeners. Use the code FRIENDS50, that's all caps, at the checkout when you register for your courses. Visit us at www.tmcinstitute.org to explore our live and on-demand psychology CE courses. Now, onward to today's episode. We often talk about mental health as a universal human experience, but the reality is that the way we seek and receive care is anything but a one-size-fits-all. Our guest today is someone who recognized that the systems we rely on often fail to reflect the cultural realities of the people we serve. Fahad Zahid is a founder and operator who is quite literally rewriting the playbook for accessible care. In fact, he is the founder and CEO of Sukoon Cares, a platform dedicated to making mental health support more culturally meaningful for South Asian communities. Fahad doesn't just bring passion to the space, he brings a decade of strategic experience from organizations like Unilever and TD Bank. He's a Fulbright scholar who studied public policy and political science at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, holds an MBA from the Schulich School of Business in Toronto, and earned his bachelor's degree from the Institute of Business Administration in Karachi. In short, he has the strategic mind of a corporate veteran and the heart of a community builder. And we're going to explore how he's using that systems-driven lens to build a more inclusive future for mental health for South Asian communities. Fahad, it is a pleasure to have you here and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jack. Excited to be here.
Yes, it's great to have this conversation. And I love that you're building a platform for South Asian communities. As we are doing this recording, we are actually doing this during the time period of Ramadan. And I imagine, there's a lot of folks that don't even realize, wait, there's this intersection of identity, like being South Asian and also spiritual practice. And how do we even reach out to therapists who understand not just challenges, the joy of practicing and being in the space while honoring Ramadan? So, Fahad, before we get into all that, why don't you tell us a little background of how you even got here?
Yeah, I think happy Ramadan to you as well. Thank you for saying that. I think it's one that I struggle with because obviously you're adjusting to these 30 days of sort of reflection, community giving, fasting, but then you also want to bring your A game. And with me, it takes a week to settle into the month of Ramadan. But yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yeah. We've had prior guests who have shared and talked about this. And I do think it's important to unapologetically talk about one's spiritual practice. So share with us, how did you discover Sukoon Cares? Yeah, where does the idea emerge?
Yeah, sure. So I think it was more of like a lot of us, right? It starts with your personal journey, right? I think before Sukoon, I'll probably maybe just rewind 10, 20 years ago. There's probably two events in my life, in my personal life that led me to Sukoon. First one was, so I grew up in Pakistan, right? The youngest of four, only son. And even though I was the youngest, in a weird way, I was always expected to lead because I was the son. And, whenever something stressful would happen at home, I stayed calm. I didn't add to it. And I was always praised that, hey, our son is so mature and so responsible, which is great. I think it sort of helped me become the person that I am. I love to lead. I think I have, the ability to absorb a lot of pressure. But on the flip side, I think what that really meant was I learned early that my job as a man, quote unquote, was to absorb pressure, right? And I remember this one day, I think I was 18 or 19 in university. I was organizing this event. I was sort of leading this event of 200 people or whatever. And the night before the event, I just started what I thought was, almost like getting a heart attack, right? Because because my heart started beating. I started getting emotional. And my mom saw me and she asked me what was going on because she was so surprised about what was happening, about this reaction, because, she's always seen me lead and, do all of these things at a young age. Then why am I having this physical reaction to this small event that, I'm organizing at university? But even though we spoke two languages at home, we spoke Urdu and we spoke Sindhi, both non-English languages, neither of those languages had a word to describe what I was going through, which is, and I'm sure you've heard that a lot, right? Like we didn't have the word to describe anxiety, like we in both Urdu and Sindhi, right? So I would have words to describe the physical symptoms that I was getting, but I didn't have the words to say that, hey, mom, I'm actually, I've been carrying all of this in, and I'm just feeling anxious. So I think that was sort of an event growing up in Pakistan at that time that made me feel that no cup existed, like, for me to put my feelings or what I'm going through into. Right. So that was one. And then fast forward, maybe I think 10, 15 years after that. So moved to Canada, like immigrated there for university. And like a lot of South Asian households, my mom and dad decided to follow me, right? And within a few months, our roles completely switched. Where if I was feeling like now I had become their parent, right? And that I'm trying to, I moved first, try to figure out the right neighborhoods where we'll, the healthcare systems and all of those things. And now that my mom and dad have moved, I'm taking on their role.
You got to help them acclimate. You're teaching them, hey, here's what you do, what you don't do, because they're just a significant type of cultural adjustment that occurs. And plus they're older. So again, the learning process, the speed of the learning is also different. So all that taking into account, considering, I'm assuming they grew up in Karachi, so they're used to, the space there, and then making that transition puts added stress for you as well.
100%. And I think and without overly generalizing, I think it's the mindset that a lot of South Asian parents have as well, which is as we get older, or if our kids probably have more of a responsibility, like we to take care of them as well. And to your point, add in all of these other nuances of new country, new language, new culture, new healthcare system, new house, new neighborhood, and they have to adjust to all of that. And you kind of naturally, as the son, or that's what you think about is take on the responsibility and quote unquote pressure of being the responsible one for them. And then so that was something so that's when I went back to therapy this time to really unpack that, right? To really understand what is it that I was feeling and how do I cope with that. And interestingly, I found myself having to explain to my therapist that to prioritize my own individual happiness, I just could not let go of my duty as a son. Like, it's hard, but I enjoy that. I want to do that. Or at least that's what
it's inextricably linked. I think, we think about individuality. Oftentimes people see therapy one-on-one. So you're right in the face. This is your need, right? It's always the focal point. And oftentimes therapists do not conceptualize, at least in Western European culture, it isn't as evident to think, oh, wait, Fahad is son of this family, this community, and his happiness is actually a shared experience. Instead, we hyper-focus on the individual client, their happiness, without connecting the happiness of also the family.
Yeah.
And, I want to go back to the part where you mentioned, please correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth. It seemed like it was a panic attack. That first, I guess, speech
in university. Yeah,
university. And as you were talking about that, I was just thinking, gosh, it's like it must have been so baffling and sort of stuck where we can't even describe, right? We didn't have the language to describe, say, a panic attack. Oh, wait, my heart's racing, my heart's beating, but not really understanding more beyond that, just because there isn't, I guess we just haven't been, I don't know, trained or taught. This is a panic attack. You don't have a language for it. Yeah. So anyway,
no, that's spot on. I think or at least in my case, what ends up happening is because the right words don't exist, because the right conversations don't exist, you end up for things to get to a point where you see physical symptoms, right? And by default, if you're waiting for a physical manifestation of a mental journey, you've waited too long, right? And that's exactly what happened.
And so then you went through that journey, you sought therapy, and then you've also talked about how even within therapy, it was almost as though you had to explain to the therapist, or educate the therapist a little bit more, and how that maybe off-putting of an experience, or again this dynamic of additional burden. Oh wait, my life thematically is already resembling issues of burden, teaching my parents things. Oh wait, now I got to teach my therapist stuff. But I'm coming to therapy for myself, but now I'm teaching the therapist more stuff.
Yes, 100%. And I think you almost start questioning your own sometimes if you don't do therapy, right? If you don't have the right therapist who understands the cultural nuances that are unique to you, but you end up questioning yourself. Am I doing something wrong? Should I be putting off what I perceive to be my duty as a son and prioritizing my own individual quote unquote happiness? Right. So I think I think I just want to double down on what you said earlier, Jack, which is it felt like Western therapy assumed autonomy, right? That they assumed autonomy was the goal. But I think I forgot how you framed it. But in my case, actually, it was collective harmony was more important, right? Like it was more important for me that my mom and dad are happy as well. They have a comfortable experience moving to a new country, adjusting to a new culture. And both things can be true. So that those were and sort of this event sort of made me feel that now I did have a cup, right? But the right cup didn't exist. The cup that existed out there wasn't built for me, right? In Pakistan, there was no cup. In North America, there is a cup, but it's not really built for me. And then as I started doing more research, just looking at what's happening in North America when it comes to South Asian mental health, right? I'm sure it's not a surprise to most people in the South Asian community, which is, I think 48% have an unmet mental health need. That's the highest among all ethnic groups, right? 1 in 3 have a perceived barrier to access mental health care. And I think I kind of knew that. But what's more interesting as you dig deeper is that it's not just lower usage or access to mental health. It's the fact that it's a different pressure system, right? So, for example, what do you think, Jack, is the biggest cause of separations or divorces in the West versus South Asia?
Oh, biggest reason for a divorce?
Yeah,
That's a great question. Oh gosh, I think in the West it's probably infidelity.
right.
Okay.
It's infidelity. Yep.
Right. And you're saying there's a difference in South Asian culture?
Yeah. And that's just another
I actually
example,
don't know because I don't do couples therapy. So
right?
this is great information actually.
Yeah. So that's the second reason, the second most sort of common cause of divorces and separations in the West is financial issues. It's the same in South Asia as well. The first one in the West is infidelity, but the first one in South Asia is issues with in-laws, right?
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
eh,
Wow.
yeah, because which makes sense, right? So it's if you as you look beneath these data points, it all makes sense because you're not like, first of all, there's a lot of joint households in South Asian communities. There is quote unquote a lack of boundaries in a lot of households. In a lot of cases, you don't just marry a partner, right? You're marrying an ecosystem, right? Because like I said, a lot of South Asians live in multi-generational homes, even when they're in North America, in US or Canada. So what that means is when a couple argues, it's not 2 nervous systems in a room, it's 5, right? That's one reason why fights or in-law dynamics is the biggest cause of separations and divorces in South Asia and in most parts of South Asia. Because the stress architecture is different, right? And so to go back to what we were discussing earlier, in the West, the care model has to be different as well. Because if therapy models, if they're built for individual autonomy, but the stress that we get lives mostly inside collective systems, then of course usage would look different as well for mental health.
Yeah. I really appreciate how you dissected the difference of reasons for divorce within the context of culture, because the level of description has never been brought up, at least to me. I took some intro family therapy classes. We had to do it in internship. And rarely does it talk about these type of family system interactions, particularly when it's in the context of, say, non-Western, non-white
Mm,
families. So I really appreciate that. So let's, due to interest of time, so you had these experiences, you're recognizing the need. And so you, from that, created this platform, which is Sukoon Cares. And when I say platform, it's maybe my, I guess, lack of understanding here. Is it a digital platform? Can you describe to our listeners a little bit more?
like we're a community, right? So we're an online community where we provide culturally adapted mental health care for the South Asian diaspora, right? So our primary focus is psychotherapy, but I really also believe in the whole body, right? Or in the whole self. So we also have a focus on nutrition and movement and community events that focus on mental health. And so we have a number of licensed psychotherapists, dietitians who are on the Sukoon quote unquote platform.
Got it. Got it. So, okay. So it truly is a community, an online community. And the reason I'm just trying to make a distinction because, during COVID, there was a huge push for a lot of these digital mental health technology out there. And, I can say that a lot of our listeners who are therapists, many have either tried them out, serving as a therapist for those platforms. And there's just been a lot of issues, right? Which you probably heard about, which is, oh, there's therapist pay issues. There's also like, oh, wait, you're only reaching out to certain types of clients. Because if you think about this, technology, who's most likely to use this type of technology? And so really the people that truly needed the help wasn't getting that help. So I think in general, just, a lot of therapists just got burned out from tech companies basically accessing our labor and
Mm.
not compensating our labor appropriately or giving us the credit. And so felt very utilitarian in exchange. Like, you're here to just do a work, we're going to pay you as a contractor and that's it. Goodbye, just a quick
Mm.
exchange. But you're a little bit different. In fact, just a little bit of background for our listeners. To be honest, I don't trust a lot of digital health tech companies out there. I just don't. And so I want to be able to provide a resource for listeners out there who can critically evaluate things and really support the therapist. And I think your company and your organization that creates this community and platform is slightly different, because you've actually described the onboarding process. You're actually developing a community of therapists. So let's hear a little bit more about what you can say about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think the part about a lot of digital health platforms coming up, that's one that I struggle with, Jack, which is I do understand how they've, it's almost really commoditized, right? Which really sucks. On the flip side, if I look at, like, I don't think I've had as many conversations about mental health with my peers, with people in my community. And in a bizarre way, I do credit some of these companies who are spending, I don't know, like $1 billion budgets on mental health topics, right? So I think it's in a way I'm thankful that has happened. Like, I can have a conversation openly with my mom, and because she's, because her Facebook feed is swamped with ads from Better Health, she now knows at least what these two words are, even though she doesn't have those words in Urdu or Sindhi. But yeah, I think with Sukoon, like, we're a community focused platform. Like I think we talked about this during our call. We focus a lot on, let's just sort of focus on cultural relevance, right? I think that's the number one thing that's important for us is making care that's culturally relevant. And for us, there's the three key pillars there. The first piece is language, right? With Sukoon, we're a young company, but we operate in 13 languages, right? All South Asian languages. Because there's even within the South Asian population, there's so much diversity. Like I said, I spoke two languages at home that aren't English because emotional nuance doesn't always translate clearly if you don't speak literally that language. So that's one, right? In terms of how we try, how Sukoon is different, how we try to make care more culturally relevant. The second piece is generational context, right? Which is the first generation stress. So, for example, let's just say myself, right? That first generation South Asian immigrant in North America, their stress is focused on survival, right? And this stress looks significantly different than my kid who will grow up as a Canadian and will probably have stress rooted in identity, right? So we try to make sure there's generational context in that we don't just focus on languages, we also prioritize the generational experience that your therapist can offer, whether somebody's first generation, the second generation, and so on. And the last piece is training, right? So I don't claim to be an expert to the level that I should be, and which is why we've surrounded ourselves by trailblazers in the field, like Dr. Mina Hussain, who's an award-winning film producer, makes movies on mental health topics, focused on Pakistani context, and is also a psychiatrist, worked in England, worked in Canada, worked in Malawi. So we've surrounded ourselves by these advisors who make sure through their training, the clinicians or the therapists who are on our platform, they aren't just culturally familiar, they're trained in culturally adapted models, which are oftentimes developed by leaders in the field, right? I think another one of our advisors is Dr. Farooq Naeem, who's a global leader in CACBT, which is culturally adapted cognitive behavior therapy. So we make sure that our clinicians get trained by leaders in the field. And like I mentioned earlier, so those are the three pillars to ensure that we're able to provide culturally relevant care for people who come to us at Sukoon Cares, whether it's language, whether it's generational context, whether it's training. But also outside of therapy, we just make sure that we do a lot of things in the community to drive awareness, right? So last month, I think we talked about this earlier, Jack, we screened a movie on focus on a mental health topic. So it was produced by Dr. Mina, like it was actually showcased at TIFF. It got selected for the TIFF Film Festival. And it really enabled us to bring the community together, come in, watch the movie, and have a focused discussion on mental health as in a community setting. So those are the things that we're trying to do with Sukoon. And, while we are thankful for, in a way, that there is broader awareness about mental health and people are more open to talk about it. Now, for the focus that we have with Sukoon is to make sure that we're able to provide the right cup for everyone so that they can feel that therapy is built for them.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we have had Dr. Farooq Naeem on our show before. Amazing psychiatrist and scholar. And I've read a lot of his peer review papers, and definitely has a significant contribution. It's great you're having him as an advisor. Also, just the amazing work you and your organization is doing, because something tells me that your heart is in the right place, because it isn't just I'm creating this digital platform or community and that's it. You're taking that extra step of connecting truly with the people, also incorporating arts, film, creation, and bridging that and having conversations about mental health and honestly making it fun. Because, mental health topics oftentimes are heavy loaded. And so finding ways to have conversations, fun ways to have conversations about it is truly wonderful. And my understanding is you are actively recruiting for therapists. Is that correct?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for saying that. That's very kind of you. I think those are the kind of words that drive us forward. Like I said, we're a young company, but I think it's just really meaningful and powerful to see the feedback from peers like yourself, leaders in the space, as well as community members. For example, I think what we are a lot of joy I think it was a couple of weeks ago, last month, where we had this person come in. Their mother had like the father had passed away recently. Mom has been in Canada for the last 20 years, but doesn't really speak English, speaks Gujarati, never seen a therapist before. And because the daughter she believed in the power of culturally relevant therapy, she forced her mom to come in and see one of our therapists who could communicate with them in their language in Gujarati. And I think she's completed 3-4 sessions already. And I think that really encapsulated for me the value that we're trying to create, right, for folks in the community, which is making mental health care more accessible for the South Asian community, making it more culturally relevant. And yes, like you mentioned, we're growing. We're always looking for more therapists. So if anyone of your listeners is interested in joining us, we'd love for them to apply. The website is sukooncares.com. It's a super simple process for them, but we'd love for folks to apply. We're looking to expand into the US this summer, starting with the West Coast. So if anyone's interested, we'd love to hear from you. And then we're also always looking to partner, right? Whether that's community leaders like yourself, whether that's folks who can advise us in the field. We're always happy to connect with folks who we can learn from, who can help us grow. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Fahad, thank you so much for your time and sharing this, just wonderful. It goes beyond project. This is a passion of yours. It's very personal, and this amazing resource that, really needs to be out there. It's really centered for South Asian communities. Oftentimes, there just aren't enough resources out there to support the growth and development and adjustment of South Asian communities as they're navigating these conversations of mental health. So thank you so much for your time today. And of course, Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for having me.
A huge thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please share and subscribe to People of Color in Psychology. You can also support us by registering for continuing education courses or making a one-time donation on the Multicultural Counseling Institute's website. Your feedback is important to us, so feel free to send an email, a message on LinkedIn, or leave a voice message on our website. Until next time, this is your host, Jack Sun.